Welcome to the Fish Nerds Podcast. I'm Clay Groves, Chief Executive Fish Nerd, and I'm sitting here with Nick. Nick, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
Now, Nick Hudson-Swager is one of our correspondents, and he is also our audio producer. So it's fun to have you on the show.
It is. I hope my audio is okay.
And this week's show, I'm probably mixing myself, so you can't take credit for it because I won't get to it until about 3 this morning.
Okay.
That's the way it is. But we're actually recording outside right now. We're sitting on Pequawket Pond, hoping to catch some pond pout.
Pond pout.
Pond pout.
Pond pout?
Pond pout.
Pond pout.
So the old New Hampshire guys call them.
Okay.
So we're just sitting here. We have our summer shandies. We're smoking cigars to keep the bugs away.
It is a beautiful evening.
It's like 85 degrees.
I know.
Stupid hot.
Feels like the Midwest.
It does, and hopefully we'll see a fish here soon. Or maybe we'll catch one live while we're recording.
That would be awesome.
Yeah,
but
this week's show. First of all, I want to before we get to this week's show, we're gonna get into it. This week's show, it's gonna be killing fishing time with Hugo. Hugo's gonna cook something strange for us. I'm thinking sea robin.
Sea robin, what's that?
Sea robin it's like a sculpin type ocean fish. Trash fish. So,
Trash fish.
You know, Hugo's big on that. And then we're going to have Andrew Lewin from Speak Up for the Blue. He has a podcast out of Toronto. It's an ocean conservation podcast, and he's a correspondent for us as well.
Right.
But I came on his show 2 weeks ago and recorded an interview, and it came out good, and I thought I'd just put it out there. That's moving because I'm bumping into it.
Yeah. I thought we were going to have excitement.
I know that would be great, but
yeah,
the best way to catch a catfish is to forget you're fishing and drink beer and talk.
There you go.
So that's the plan. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about safety and why you should always wear a PFD while fishing.
Oh, you're going to put me on the spot here?
Yes, and so I follow along. And if you're not already on the Fish Nerds Facebook group, it's a podcast group on Facebook, you miss out on the fun little adventures. And Nick's always posting his fishing stories on there. And Nick went out fishing alone on his kayak one morning on a pond in the middle of nowhere.
I did, yes.
And you went bass fishing.
I did.
How'd it go?
Well, I didn't catch any bass. And did catch some pickerel.
Excellent.
There's tons of pickerel in that pond.
Excellent.
Absolutely masses. But so I was on my way back, and I wasn't really paying attention. And I went to grab something on the kayak and just tipped it over. Now, the ironic part of this, and you're going to get a kick out of this.
Okay, because I love irony.
Yes. So the previous night, I was watching some fishing blooper videos on YouTube.
And you're laughing at people
and I'm laughing at people tipping their kayaks going, how does anybody do that?
It's impossible.
It's impossible. Why, And then as I was heading out, I was like, it'll be just my luck. If I tip my kayak. And sure enough, I did. And everything went overboard. And I was luckily wearing my life vest, which I always do.
Smart. I don't always.
Yes.
I'm a bad example.
I also always tell somebody, it's just like hiking. I tell somebody where I'm going to be when I expect to be off the water for this exact reason. So, I had to search for my rods, and I lost a rod, and went back and snorkeled for it and didn't find it.
It's so hard to find things when you're snorkeling in those lakes.
It really is. It's mucky, and it had rained, and there was no chance. But I did recover 2 of my rods at the time, which was good.
That's pretty good. And you didn't lose your cell phone or anything like that?
No, I had my cell phone in a waterproof case in a zipper pocket in my PDF, so PFD.
PFD.
Yes.
Yeah, PDF, it's a document.
That's right.
Yeah. It's
I mix them up sometimes.
One of them will float you someplace, and one won't.
Yes.
So,
if you try floating with a PDF, you're just not going anywhere.
So the moral is always wear your life jacket or some sort of flotation. I want to get one of those like inflatable belts or something.
Yeah.
Because I don't like wearing a big poofy life jacket.
It's a little bit of a pain, but I just feel so much more secure. And after this experience, I will never go without it.
Yeah, and it's smart, especially alone like that. You never know. And we've in our area, we've actually lost a few people recently on the rivers here not wearing life jackets. So it's really important and critical you do it. And they sell really good ones now too that look good and are comfortable. So you can always buy a nice one.
Well, I got mine at that outfitter place that's going out of business.
Mm-hmm.
So you could get a good deal there if you need one.
I'll do that tomorrow.
Okay,
it's on my list. So anyway, we're here. We're fishing. This episode tonight is brought to you by Patreon.com. That's you guys, our listeners. So if you want to support the show, go to Patreon.com/FishNerds and donate to the show. Most people give $1 an episode, $4 a month, and that goes a long way to keeping the show going. Right now, we're getting about $300 a month, which is fantastic, and that barely covers the production cost of this show. All the internet stuff we do and the Facebooky things and the buying the equipment, and but it doesn't cover time or travel or any other expenses. So we need money to keep this show on the road, and it's important.
Yeah, and as somebody who is now involved in the production, the amount of time and effort, work that goes into producing the show is actually quite impressive. So the money really does go somewhere important.
Right, we got to pad your pockets.
Yeah. I need to get paid.
Yeah, but we had the Patreon paid for the equipment. We're outside recording outside, and it sounds good because of Patreon, because of you guys. If you donate at the $25 an episode level, which is pretty high bar, we'll mention your business on the show. So we have right now, Josh Lopes has donated $25 per episode. He's lopestax.com. So if you're in Massachusetts and you need a fancy pants accountant, he's your guy. Go to lopestax.com. And he's actually a really good guy. He's my neighbor, and I've been fishing with him as well. So.
Is he good at fishing?
No, he sucks. Yeah, but his kids are great, and that's what counts. So anyway, patreon.com/thefishnerds. Help us support this show. And now we're going to kick this ball down to Hugo with Killing Fishing Time with Hugo.
Hey folks, Hugo Madero's here with some more adventures in cooking seafood on the behalf of the Fish Nerds. So we're into late spring here in Massachusetts and New England in the US, having a great time. Finally, it was a slow winter here. Didn't get many chances to ice fish just because of the weather or to open water fish. So finally spring has come and I've been going out as much as I can, every chance I can, and having a blast. So this one is cool. This is a great fish, great creature, and it's not only cool looking, underutilized, it's also, well, you know me, it's awesome to eat. So this is about the sea robins. So these creatures, if you guys haven't seen them, Google it. They're so cool looking. They're very abundant. You catch them as you're trying to catch, game species like stripers or black sea bass and other species. They're fun to catch. A lot of people hate catching them because they are everywhere, and they're usually pretty small and they're tough to clean. But if you do it, they have 2 strips of meat kind of along the tail, from the back of the head all the way back down, one on each side. When you cut them out, you get these two little like tenderloins of white fish, and they are delicious. The other thing that someone turned me on to last year is their fish roe, the eggs that they have. So I love eggs of all sorts and have eaten eggs from all sorts of fish as far as I can remember. So I tried these ones last year. You got to be careful to get them out. They, it's a roe sack, and you have to be careful when you're gutting them to get it out carefully. But once you do, and once you've cooked them, I love them. They're very mild flavor, kind of sweet, nutty almost flavor, and they're just delicious. I just ate a bunch of them. I ate probably 3-4 meals with these. So this one's wicked cool. What I did with this one is I took a cupcake pan, and in each of the holes where you would make the cupcakes, I lined the walls with bacon. And then after that, I would take one roe sack and put it inside in the middle, and then I cracked an egg and put it in there, and seasoned it, of course, with a little bit of salt and pepper. So those went in the oven for a while. I was curious to see how this came out. I don't know what made me think of it, but I got those guys out and I tried it, and it is delicious. What I ended up doing after my first or second one is I topped it with sambal lulek, which is this. You'll see it in the Asian sections of the American grocery stores. It's this crushed red peppers in a little red clear jar with the green top. So I put that, fresh cut scallions, and just the mix of flavors of all that and the textures with the egg and the bacon and the roast sack is awesome. So I'm gonna post we'll post the recipe up on fishnerds.com. Check it out. I'd love to eat all sorts of stuff. It might sound a little bit crazy. It's not weird tasting at all. It was delicious. So I can't wait to get out there and get some more of these little guys. Have fun, everybody. Later.
Okay, fish nerds, one more thing you should know. We started last week a program where we're reporting on your local fishing conditions. And we got a few phone calls in. If you want to be part of it, call 607-378-FISH and leave your fishing report. At the end of every episode after the credits, you will hear fishing reports. The hope is to get people from around the world calling in every week with their reports. And you can mention your business or whatever. If you're a guide, you can mention that, your website, whatever you want. And you can be as creative as you want. So just call us in, 607-378-FISH. Leave us your name, your location, because that matters.
Yes, it does.
And what's the fishing like in your area? And don't make stuff up. Just tell us what's going on.
So should I report my flipping thing as well, or
You could say the water is very wet in Maine today, so wear your PFDs. Oh, and we're back. And after hearing Hugo cooking all that food, it makes me want to cook food. When's the last time you've had fresh seafood?
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I think actually when we went ice fishing was the last time I had fresh food.
That's too bad.
Fish, yeah.
Now, you missed out last night. I invited you over to my house.
You did.
So let me tell you what we had last night. I invited the Smolens over.
Yep.
And so I was out fishing earlier this week with Captain Sean, which we're going to talk about in 1 second.
Yep.
And we caught a bunch of pollock and haddock and Acadia redfish. So last night at my house, I had a fish fry. But I also had this project we're working on called Eating with the Ecosystem, where I need to eat sustainable seafood every week, and they give me a list of fish to catch, or to get at the store.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the fish on my list this week was not a fish, it was lobster.
Oh.
So you missed out last night. We had fresh haddock, fresh pollock, and lobster.
I really did miss
last
out.
night at my house, and we feasted. It was fabulous. And this time of year, lobster is not, they're about to molt.
Yep.
So they're full of meat. They're not all hollowed out lobster.
Okay.
They're stacked. So anyway, we had that last night. Next week on the show, we're going to have the folks from Eating with the Ecosystem on the show, and they're going to talk about sustainable seafood projects, a citizen science project they're working on, and how people can participate and be part of eating sustainably seafood.
That'll be exciting. That's a really interesting project.
It is, and I understand a lot about, but I'm still questioning what they consider sustainable. So I have some questions. For example, also on my list is cod.
Okay.
Now, there's a moratorium on cod fishing in Maine right now.
Right.
So how can that be on my sustainable seafood list?
Is it sustainable other places?
Yeah, like Alaska.
Ah.
And so, but they're supposed to be about local. So I'm going to have a lot of questions about it. They may clarify, or maybe they'll agree with me. I don't know.
Interesting.
So I'm open to hearing what they have to say. So that'll be fun. Also, next week on the show, last week I went fishing with Captain Sean from MaineTunaFishing.com.
Yep.
I brought the recording equipment on the boat with me, and I recorded some audio. So next week, we'll be splicing that together and talking about fishing at MaineTunaFishing.com with Captain Sean Tibbetts. The reason I'm bringing it up now, though, is we're offering a contest right now. We're giving away a fishing trip for two on the Miss Megan 2. That's MaineTunaFishing.com's boat. And that's ground fishing. That means 25 miles out to Jeffrey's Ledge to catch pollock and haddock and
wow, that's an amazing
fish.
Opportunity.
Yeah, it's like an $800 value. And the way you get in on that contest, you go to our Facebook page and you find at the top of it, you'll find a contest link. You click through, enter a quick survey, and you're entered. You can enter once that way. But you can enter two more times by giving $10, by throwing $10 in the hat. And here's the trick. Now, a lot of people are going, Clay, what's that $10 for? You give it to charity? And the answer is no, I'm not giving it to charity. The $10 goes to pay for the trip. The trip costs a lot of money. The gas to get out there is not free. Captain Sean is not a big operation. I'm not a big operation, and these things cost money. So we're trying to break even on this trip. We're just giving it away. So we're hoping that people like, yes, I want to be on the trip, and I don't mind throwing $10 in on that to hopefully win a trip that's worth $800.
Yeah, that's amazing that he's willing to do that.
Yeah, we did it 2 years ago.
How'd
And
it go?
we caught a 6.5-foot mako shark that was like 210-pound fish
Oh, was that the mako shark that you considered eating this year?
that I'm not going to eat again. But
Yeah.
we ate it that time, and I learned that we shouldn't do that. But anyway, but that went well. So this is a ground fishing trip where we're targeting sustainable fish. Now Captain Sean he gets a little anxious and he acts out like a child, and that's okay. And he's a lot of fun. So next week on the show, you're going to hear a bit of that. Next week's show is not for people who don't like bad language, because it will be a rated R show.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and I apologize in advance. You can try and beep him, but I think you'll give up on it pretty quick.
No point. Just put a disclaimer in front of it.
Well, here it is.
Yep.
So anyway, that's next week. Go to the Fish Nerds Facebook group to find that contest. Or you can go to the maintunafishing.com's Facebook page and you'll find that contest. Click through. If you click the yes button, you're willing to throw $10 in that, I'll invoice you. You give us $10, and that helps cover the cost of the show. So it seems selfish and self-serving, but it is. But these things cost money. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not Walmart. I'm the
No.
Fish Nerds. So
You are.
I are Fish Nerds.
Arr.
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 All right. Hey, speaking of nerds, we have Speak Up for Blue as a partner of ours. They're a podcast out of Toronto, but they reach the world. And Andrew Lewin is an ocean scientist, and he makes this podcast called Speak Up for Blue. And I went on his show and recorded this great interview with him. I think he was fantastic. He really asked all the right questions. And so here is Speak Up for Blue with Andrew Lewin. And we encourage you to go over and to your iTunes or wherever you're getting your podcast and subscribe to his show.
Hey, Clay, welcome to Speak Up for Blue podcast. Are you ready to dive in and talk about some ocean conservation?
I'm always ready to talk about ocean conservation, even when I'm
Right.
killing things in the ocean.
What a great way to start the episode.
Yeah.
A wonderful
We're
way
going to talk
do
about
it.
that, yeah.
We got Clay on. He kills things in the ocean.
Mhm.
And welcome to the show.
Hey, yeah, hi. I am death. Welcome to my nightmare.
This is what the show is going to be like the way through, folks. We get along really, really well. Clay, you and I have known each other for about a year, but it feels like we've known each other forever. I've been on your podcast because you do have a podcast called The Fish Nerds,
Mhm.
which I've been happy to contribute to from time to time, and I look forward to contributing more. But
Does that make you my employee? Yeah, my
Ooh.
unpaid? Are you doing
unpaid- your
fellowship?
intern?
Yeah, my
Maybe your
intern. Yeah, I'm correspondent.
I get your coffee.
If our show ever makes money, someday I plan on paying correspondence.
The correspondence.
Right now I pay you with like kindness.
Hey, you pay me. No, you pay me with listeners, man.
Yeah.
We cross our audience,
Yeah, for
audience,
sure.
and that's thing, and that's the greatest thing about podcasting, right? Is that cross pollination type work. But we're going to talk about some sustainable seafood today.
Mhm.
That's what, and I'm excited because this is something that I've been talking about throughout, since we started the podcast 2 years ago, and we've been frustrating it is to figure out what's sustainable, what's not. Now there are apps and everything like that, but the people that we buy food from don't always follow the apps or don't really know what it's about. Because I go to the grocery store and I say, hey, where is this fish from and how was it caught? And the 15-year-old that's getting paid minimum wage, who can barely speak because he's so shy, is saying, I don't know, like, I have no idea. Then I'm like, well, I can't buy from here because, I don't know where it's coming from. And he's like, I don't care. I'm just here for the money.
Right.
And it's just,
And he thinks you're a
very
dick because you're hassling him, right? So you're like, why are you hassling
Yeah.
me? I'm just
why are you
some
asking me all
kid.
these questions?
I scraped the bottom of the fish bin at the other day. What am I supposed to know stuff? It's crazy.
Exactly. So we're going to talk all about that kind of stuff. How you look for seafood because I've listened to one. And we're going to talk about one of your recent podcasts where you presented at the Virginia Aquarium, where you recorded that for your podcast. But it was really interesting to hear how you look for food, you look for specific fish, that journey, and then to cook it, and then now you're into sustainable seafood and how you get into that and how we can really get into that for different types of fish and whatnot. But first, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself for people who haven't listened to the Fish Nerds podcast. By the way, we're going to be putting the links to the show notes. It's going to be speakupforblue.com/fish nerds. But if you're on your podcast app, just go to Fish Nerds, but we'll put the links in the show notes. But just to let everybody know who you are, what you do, all that kind of jazz.
Oh, sure. So my name is Clay. I am the chief executive fish nerd of the Fish Nerds podcast, right? Just like you're an oceanpreneur, I'm a fish nerdpreneur.
Right.
Only, just like you, neither one of us make any real money at this yet, but it's coming. But I've been making the Fish Nerds podcast for 3 years now. Been through co-hosts and many correspondents over that time. But we make a show about fish, fishing, and eating fish. And we always say anything is fair game, which is a nice broad spectrum because fish is everything. And I'll tell you one thing I love about fish. There's a lot of things because fish are amazing. But the thing I like about fish is every culture is impacted by fish. No matter where you live on the planet, you live in a place where fish are nearby. And the reason your town is where it's at or your village is where it's at is because fish were there. And it's that kind of one thing we can all talk about that all matters to all of us, right? And so we love that. And it's kind of like everyone has something to talk about with fish. And the podcast came from, originally I went on a quest to catch and eat every kind of freshwater fish in New Hampshire. Part of that was just to do something no one's done before. But the other part of it was to bring awareness to non-game species of fish that no one cares and knows about.
Okay.
In fact, I'm going to take credit. In New Hampshire, we have a fish called a fall fish. It's New Hampshire's largest native minnow, and they get about 3 pounds, right?
Okay.
Imagine like a shiny little carp like a thing.
Yeah.
And I will argue that before I went on this quest, no one knew the name of the fall fish unless they were a biologist or worked in the industry. Everyone online, all the Facebook groups and all that called them chubs and river dace and all kinds of weird, not quite names of fish. Those are all like generic things. They didn't care.
Well, first of all, minnows are very difficult to identify.
They are very difficult, but fall fish in New Hampshire are pretty easy because they're kind of a unique thing for the state. I can share some links later. But the cool thing is I've been pushing the name fall fish for years. And now you go on those same groups online, all the big online forums, and people are talking about the fish they caught, and they're getting every other fish wrong still, but they're getting fall fish right. That's because of me. Huh. Yeah, I'm going to own that. It's probably not just me, but I'll take some credit. But we caught and ate them all. And the reason we ate them all was again, not when you're doing something, especially doing it publicly, you have to do it bigger. And I always tell my kids, when you do something good, do it one gooder, right? Well, to make it one gooder, that's my science talk. It means to make better.
I love it.
To make it one better, we ate them all because, again, everyone eats, right? And turns out most people would prefer to talk about eating the fish than any other part of the quest. They want to know what's the worst tasting, best tasting, weirdest, funniest. Did you die? How's your mercury levels this year? I love all that kind of conversation. It's really great. And it really helps us a lot to have that conversation, and it makes it funnier. And I also have a science teacher background. I've been a science teacher for years. I'm a trainer of science teachers. And so communicating science is part of what I do as well. We were talking about the pre-show. And so I love to dive into a lot of the science topics that people maybe don't understand. And here's the funniest thing is I am wrong more than I'm right. And it's true. And I take a lot of flack for that. A lot of, cause I'm also a fishing guide. Fishing guides live in a world of egos, right? Where they're right all the time. I've got a patch on. I have somewhere. I thought I had some guide patches I would show you, but I've got a guide patch, and that says I know stuff. Right. But I've got a science teaching background, which means I love to be wrong, and I love to learn from that. So I post pictures of fish online sometimes. I get them wrong. And then I get phone calls from guides saying, Clay, you might want to take that post down because you called a brown trout a salmon, and I know you went to guide school, and blah, 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 blah. And the reality is what happens, I post a picture of a fish up, and I get it wrong, and someone says, wow, Clay, that's a salmon. And I go, you're right. I made the classic mistake of judging a fish by its color and not by its fin structure or whatever it happened to be. And rather than take it down and pretend I know stuff, I went, you're right. I was wrong. Thanks for showing me. Which is a different attitude than probably most other know-it-all podcasts have, I hope.
Yeah.
But mostly the most important thing about the Fish Nerds podcast is it's nerdy and it's fun. And if I'm not having fun, I'm out of here. Because we do this same as you. We do this for almost free. We got some Patreon subscribers. I know you've got some Patreon people as well. Give us a little bit of money here and there. That helps, but it doesn't put money in the bank. It doesn't put gas in the car. It doesn't pay our travel expenses. It barely buys my wife dinner. Which is an important part of also what I do.
Absolutely.
So anyway, Fish Nerds Podcast, fishnerds.com for all your Fish Nerds needs.
Perfect.
It's fun. Mostly it's fun. And you're a contributor to our show. You work with us now, which is great.
I am. I love it. I'll tell you my first, and I've said it here before on the show, but I'm going to say it again because you're here. Before I went on your show, and it's the reason actually why I started the Facebook group for Speak Up for Blues, because you have probably one of the most engaging groups on Facebook that I've ever been a part of.
That's the Fish Nerds Podcast group. You can join today.
That's right. Yeah, just look it up. We'll put the links to that
easy.
because it is a great group. But it's one of those. You were prepping for the show. I think it was like a week until we went on, until we were going to record. And you put in. It was right after we talked. You said, "Hey, I'm going to have Andrew Lewin, who is an ocean conservationist. He is a scientist. What questions would you like to ask?" And at first I was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool. We'll see like maybe one or two questions." And it just went. I couldn't believe it. How many questions there were.
I could do a daily show on just the stuff people post in our Facebook group.
Oh yeah.
I would never run out of material. The people in that group, I say guys, but it's guys and girls. The people in that group are constantly asking questions, constantly challenging my assumptions. But the nice thing about it is if you go to a lot of other fishing groups, if you're a fisherman, you'll find on those other fishing groups, people are mean. And in our group, people are listening. And they're disagreeing like crazy. There's plenty of disagreement.
There's a debate going on, but it's respectful.
Yeah, they like each other.
Yeah, I know it's true. And when I went in to answer the questions, and then I was getting replies like within minutes, and I was just like, wow, these guys and girls are really into it, and it made for, I think, a better show for you and I, because we were both prepped on what your listeners wanted to hear, and then we started talking. And to be honest, since then, they still ask me questions, and I still stay in the group. And
they tag you now, right? Now, like, hey, Andrew, what about this? What about this? What about this? Yeah.
And it's great because in the segments that I contribute to your show, I'm like, tag me in if you have a question, because I want to answer it. Because some of these, sometimes when you do science communication, I'm sure you felt the same way, is you touch upon the overview stuff, right? The high level stuff that not everybody understands or not everybody really knows, but you're saying it over and over and over again. I find the people in Fish Nerds and people on Speak Up for Blue want to go that one level deeper.
Yep.
And the questions that, one of the questions that I answered on both shows was, are the gray seals in Cape Cod affecting the recovery of cod? That was a great question. And it's fun to get into those kinds of answers because they're real issues.
Yeah. And they're interesting, and having that real life connection is nice. The interesting thing about both those groups, we're going to pat each other on the back all night here, but the groups have crossed over a lot too, because I'm spending time in your group, and I'm seeing people in your group who have been into my show for years. Yeah. And I'm seeing them bleed into your group, and they should. Yeah. Both groups are valuable. Both groups have great conversation. You should join our groups and then ditch everyone else. Screw them.
Absolutely.
Because they suck.
I agree. But it's true. Like, it's funny because both of us will get material from one of the groups, and then we'll go to the next group and cover the same stuff because we're like, hey, did you guys hear this? This is what we're covering. Yeah. But it sparks conversation, and when you have people who are ready to do the conversation, it's great. And the reason why I'm really talking about this, because you guys should join both groups, the Fish Nerds group as well as Speak Up for Blue community, because it's fun. It's fun to get into it and to talk and to debate and to go and see everybody's viewpoints, and everybody's respectful, because I don't like any kind of disrespect in my group, but everybody's great so far. So it's been wonderful. But what, I got to ask you the question in terms of a podcast itself. The outdoor podcasts are pretty competitive in terms of listeners. You do pretty well. We've shared our numbers. You do pretty well.
Yeah, I would say I'm in the game. I
think we're both above average. Yeah. Your show does better than mine, and now. Well, it's great. I mean, I'm glad we both wanted the shows to do well. But what made you decide on podcasting and not just blogging or like YouTube or something like that? Why?
Right,
Why?
well, you can see what I look like, so YouTube's out. Sorry, I can't help how I look. It's who I am.
No, I
So-
love it. I think you should start a YouTube
Yeah.
channel.
So forget that. Well, we have a YouTube channel, and all of our podcasts go there. We have some videos up. I don't know how
Right.
to edit video, and I have friends who are good at that. Let them have that game.
Right.
We started the podcast because my original partner Dave Kellum. We started writing a book about the quest to catch and eat every kind of freshwater fish in New Hampshire, and we were writing for a couple of magazines who we put out of business with our writing. That's not both magazines we wrote for that year of the quest, or 3 years of the quest, went out of business while we were writing for them. So I know.
yeah.
Out of all
That's so
all the New Hampshire magazines to go out of business.
Yeah.
I know. And we were writing this book. We had a big time agent out of New York City who was trying to sell the book for us, and publishing houses kept coming back to us and saying, "You're too New Hampshire. Why would someone in Toronto care about catching all the fish?" And I'm like, maybe you haven't read our pitch, or maybe our agent wasn't selling the book well, because we're telling stories.
Or they don't know any kind of fishing person in general, because fishing people will, there's definitely there's that connection, right?
Fishing is all regional. Any fish story you write, it's about a place,
Right.
right? And New Hampshire happens to be the setting, but every book has a setting, right? But we
But
wrote
it
about
crosses over the ideas behind it. Like if you think about the same thing as like craft beer, when
Yeah.
you go to a different place, you want to try their craft beer.
you want the local
People will-
flavors.
That's right. People will come from Toronto and will go to New Hampshire to fish, or will
Mhm.
go to the Yukon to fish. That's what they like to do, because it's a different region.
So anyway, all this writing, we never sell the book. We've got, I would say, about 78% completed, done.
Right.
And writing is hard. And when you're writing for free, which is pretty much what we do, well, you get paid a little bit of money, but if you break it down on a hourly rate, you're making about
Yeah.
10 cents
hear
an hour. Writing's hard. So we thought making a podcast would be easy, right? Now you do this. That's also not true. They say for a 1 hour podcast, if you don't do a lot of editing, you can expect 4 hours of editing for about
Yeah.
a 1 hour show. If you're a big editor, and we tried doing the NPR edits, and that took like forever. We did a few shows like that. That took longer, but we made the podcast because we both of us were very good communicators, very good speakers. We used to teach together, and we had a good feel for each other, and we did some presentations to like the library organizations and stuff, and we really had a good rapport. So we thought, let's make a podcast. So we did, and we launched it. And my original headset was just like a cheap, I stole it from my classroom. It was a cheap kid's headset with a little microphone in front of the mouth, and the sound quality was absolutely terrible. And
As everybody's first podcast is.
yeah, and we sent it out in the world, and we weren't ready for it to be popular, and it got it got featured on iTunes immediately, and got a bazillion downloads the first week, and then it crashed and burned because everyone listened to it and went, "Oh my god, it's funny!" And we got feedback like this: "It's funny, but your quality is so terrible." And we're like, "We peaked too soon,"
Yeah. You almost want that run up a little bit and then figure out the sound and then go for it. Right?
Yeah, they should. iTunes should never feature a brand new podcast. Give them 15 episodes, and then feature them. And by the way, anyone who's listened to a brand new podcast, episode 1, and if you find the content good, email the host and say, "Love your content. Buy a good microphone, please." We actually got that email, and then we went out and bought good microphones. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
after my 12th episode is when I bought this microphone.
Yeah, it
I've been
matters.
using it ever since. It does, and everybody ever since is like, "Wow, that actually." Now I went to a conference and people recognize me by the voice. They're like,
Yes.
"Oh my god, that's the voice."
You do have a beautiful voice, like a
thank you.
like a canary. Stunning. Yeah, but anyway, we make the podcast, and then we start getting feedback, and it's that feedback loop. It's the listeners that keep us making it. If we never got any feedback at all, no one ever reacted to anything we did, we would have been done a long time ago.
I hear you, because it's tough to put it out, and then when you don't hear feedback, you're like, "Is this what people want?" And then you look at your statistics, and you're like, "Oh my god, nobody downloaded on a Saturday. Well, maybe they don't like my my voice, and you get all this paranoia. Yeah, I've been through all that.
I find my listeners prefer when I'm drinking a lot.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm sober right now, just so we're clear.
Yeah, we're both sober. But I'll tell you what, there is a podcast coming, the Speak Up for Blue Network, that has a happy hour involved in it.
Oh, good. Well, we have the similar things happening, and we have a show coming up soon with another podcast called Great Beer Adventure, where we'll be doing beer drinking, fishy beers, so like Sculpin IPAs and all that kind of stuff, and we'll be doing whole testing. I think what we'll do that time is get all of our correspondents around the world, including you if you want to play, to get their local fish named beer, and we'll do a big beer tasting around the world and do a share that way. It'd be totally fun.
That'd be so good.
So anyway, let's get on with your topic.
Fishing.
Sustainable fishing, right?
So let's start off with, when you contacted me and we've been talking about having you on the show for a while. You're like, hey, let's talk about sustainable fishing. I immediately thought about, and when we talked about an article that Rhett Talbot, a mutual friend of ours, who's been on the show as well, wrote, sustainability. And he's, in the article, he talks about sustainability. It shouldn't be something that should be like elitist, which a lot of people think it is.
Well, you see it, it's actually, it makes a very good point in that. And I actually kind of thought that before I saw his article, but you think about organic foods, right?
Right.
I hate it. I hate the marketing of organic foods.
Yeah.
I don't buy organic foods, for one, because I don't like food wrapped in plastic. And for some reason, the supermarket, everything organic wrapped in plastic. And then the stuff with pesticides is out free in the open. I'm like, well, I'm going to buy the stuff with pesticides and wash it off because I don't like single-use plastic. So screw you organic marketers. You guys are dumb. Stop it. Stop.
If they were true and organic, they would understand the plastic problem.
Because organic is a sales tool, not a quality tool.
Exactly.
And I think the sooner we realize that, the better. And I think sustainability can move in that same direction, and that would be a mistake. And I think that's Brett's point, is it ends up becoming just a marketing tool and an elitist thing like, oh, I'm sustainable and you're not, right? Yeah. And it misses the whole point of sustainable fish and fishing.
Yeah. Well, and I find too that when you go to the supermarket and you actually look at Whole Foods and stuff like that, within it's just all they need is one ingredient that has to be organic to make it, they can sell it as organic. And in Canada, I don't find there's a really good certification program to say that it's actually organic.
Yeah, and I'm not convinced it's better for you. I think one thing to keep in mind with organic foods is there's giant factory farms in China producing organic vegetables for us for consumption, right? We're still importing this food from around the world. It's still getting pesticides on it, but they're organic pesticides. But chemicals are everything, right? People forget. They go, oh, I don't want chemicals on my food. Well, then don't eat, because everything is a chemical, right? Water is a chemical. But they are using caustic chemicals on organic foods that have to be organic certified pesticides.
Yeah.
It's still...
Which is kind of
still happening. Yeah.
No, I agree. I agree.
So I think, so when we talk about sustainable fish, it's really tricky. It's a hard conversation, and it seems to be no solid one answer. So when I was at the Virginia Aquarium last week, I got to go, 2 weeks ago, got to go to the Virginia Aquarium and Marine Science Center to speak all week to people about sustainable seafood. Now, I'm not an expert. Mostly I went to learn about sustainable seafood, but
you were also invited by the aquarium.
They invited me. Oh yeah. They flew me down and put me in a big fancy hotel, and I was
nice. I wanted to make sure people knew that.
Oh man. Oh yeah. No, I was totally their guest. I was a celebrity guest for a week. And you'd love this, awesome. Because as a total nerd yourself, I got the behind the scenes aquarium tour. So I got to see how they care for the fish. Yeah. I also learned, I've been calling fish dumb for years. I take it all back. Fish are, did you know, this is kind of a sidebar, but did you know at these big aquariums, they train each fish individually to eat? So they hand feed them all, and that we keep track of all the food they're eating. So if they need to feed a spotted ray, for example, they've trained them to come to like a purple paddle they put in the water, and that each individual spotted ray has their own color they've been trained to, and they hand feed them all. The pufferfish, spotted rays, the barracudas, the sharks, everything is trained this way. And they
they can monitor their health.
They can monitor, or if they have to do surgery, or the doctor needs to get in there, they come right up to those paddles. It's remarkable. And I also learned about secret aquariums. Like I'm sure, do you have an aquarium in Toronto?
Yeah, the Ripley's. Yeah.
And I bet you about 20 miles away, there's a second super secret aquarium. I've learned about this.
Where
This
they
is-
keep all this stuff.
Yeah, where they keep the backup fish, where the science is done, where the
Yeah.
rescues happen. I learned about that. I got to go to a secret aquarium. I mean, all this really cool stuff. But
That is
mostly I was there because they have a program called Sensible Seafood. They're trying to educate the public about how to buy seafood, right? So when
Yeah.
you go to the supermarket, my assumption in the supermarket is they wouldn't sell it to me if it wasn't sustainable, right?
Right.
And if you ask them, they're going to tell you that. In my big supermarket here, I live in Mount Washington Valley, New Hampshire, in the mountains, maybe an hour from the ocean. There's giant signs. We only serve sustainable seafood here. So now the trick is, how does one define sustainable seafood, right? And this is the challenge that we all face. And what I've been trying to get people to do is look at 4 main ingredients here. What makes it something sustainable for seafood, right? My biggest one, and this is not everyone agrees with me on this. I'm not right, but my biggest one is it local, right? So if
Yeah.
you're near the ocean, if you're on vacation in South Carolina, for example, and you're at a restaurant and they're serving you Alaskan crab legs, maybe you don't want to get that. Maybe you want to eat blue crab, which are caught locally, right? Now, arguably, both populations are strong on both those both those
Yeah.
crabs.
Yeah.
But one is more sustainable than the other because it doesn't travel as much. Now, I'm defining sustainable as
The whole process.
the whole process, right?
Yeah.
How does it impact the
Yeah.
environment, not just that population of fish? And that's different than a lot of people do it. So is it local is one, right? Is it plentiful? Are there lots of that kind of fish? Right. So if they're red listed or if they're
Right.
recommended, even on the yellow list, maybe you want to avoid that species and pick something that's not in danger.
Yeah.
I don't eat cod anymore, for example, even though they still
Right.
sell it in supermarkets, and I don't eat cod. I like it. It's delicious.
Yeah, of course. It's delicious. It's,
I'll eat other fish in the cod family, but I won't eat the Atlantic cod anymore
Right.
because I don't believe it's a good idea.
right.
And then, and so is it abundant? That's really important. And then I would ask when it was caught. Is it local? I mean, is it fresh? Which doesn't necessarily mean it's not sustainable. It's just I like it that way. And then
course.
how was it caught?
Yep.
Right. Because if
That's the big one.
you're out there eating blue crab and they're dredging the bottom in the winter where blue crab are hibernating, and they're disrupting the environment, the crab itself totally sustainable because numbers are strong, but you've wrecked oyster beds and all kinds of other things as you were scraping the bottom there. So there's a problem with that. Now, can we expect a server at a restaurant to know those things?
I'll tell you what, though.
It's tough.
At a good restaurant, you do.
You do.
At
You
a,
do.
At a fancier restaurant where you're paying the big bucks, they usually do.
Yeah,
Not
well,
all of them.
They
usually-
generally speaking, they do, and that's marketing to rich people, right?
right.
They're
right.
to the organic people, the gluten-free people, the whoever.
Yeah.
It's a bunch
true.
of rich white
It's true.
people. Let's be honest. That's who's,
That's what it is,
Yeah.
for sure. For sure.
there's no poor person on earth who's gluten-free.
No,
So, but it's a marketing tool, right? And it's okay, and that's fine. But we can ask one question, and this is where I always say, just ask one question: where was that fish from? Basic question, and that starts the conversation, right? And if they don't know that one thing, then order the pork. That's
yeah,
the-
yeah, exactly.
It's the basics.
If they
I
can't
don't
figure out where
yeah.
it's from.
Exactly. If they don't know where it was sourced from. And that's kind of where I push people into doing. I know I'm participating in a program right now called Eating with the Ecosystem, which is a citizen science project. Now, you motivated me to look for a citizen science project.
boy, there we go.
I heard your
Love
podcast
this.
on this, and I found one that was happening in New England called Eating with the Ecosystem. And the way it is every week, there's 200 of us doing the project. Every week, we get a random email of 4 sustainable fish that are caught in the Gulf of Maine.
Okay.
So, and they define it as local, fresh, abundant, right? And they didn't mention how it's caught. They just do those 3 things as far as their definition goes, and that's fine. It's their experiment. And then we have to go to our local market and buy them. Now I'm 5 weeks in. In 5 weeks, I've not got one fish on my list.
Because they haven't sold it.
They don't sell them at my market. Now they do.
And you're an hour away
from
so
the
just
ocean.
in perspective, you're near the Gulf of Maine. New
Yeah.
Hampshire. Is it in the Gulf of Maine?
It
No,
is, yeah.
It is, yeah.
Yep.
So you're in the Gulf of Maine, an hour away.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a short truck delivery,
Mm-hmm.
and you haven't been able to find that local.
Well, let's clarify. There are probably 60 different fish and shellfish on the list, and I'm giving a random slump of 4 a week. It doesn't mean the fish in my stores aren't on that list. They're just not on the 4 I'm given. So like lobster might come up someday on my list. Lobster's always available here, right?
Yeah.
And
so what what kind of fish? Give us an example.
So here's what I have not been able to find locally yet, right?
Okay.
I have not been able to find periwinkle. I have not found striped bass. Striped bass is caught this time of year with hook and line. It's not big netted fish, right? So that's sustainable. I have not found bay quahogs. They ocean quahogs, according to this, are not sustainable, but bay quahogs are. I found ocean quahogs. I have not found. I mean, a triggerfish. I've not found.
So is it?
It's very specific.
The fact that they're not in season.
No, they're all in season.
Supposed
right
to be
now.
in season, so that's part of the experiment.
That's part of the experiment.
Everybody,
yeah,
in season. And
yeah.
Sustainable. And these are not the ones the ones you mentioned are. Well, I guess maybe striped bass you would expect to be in there, but
striped bass you expect, but periwinkle you wouldn't expect.
Maybe a little bit different.
Spiny dogfish is not in the stores. They're not serving spiny dogfish in the stores. You can get that now. If I drove an hour to the ocean, I would get all these things, but that defeats the purpose
in your area,
of the experiment.
The whole experiment is in your area.
So by the way, anyone who's doing these kind of science things, don't try to rig it. Don't drive an hour and get the thing.
Just because you say I got it,
Well, because you want to do it, you want to eat the food, right? But it doesn't work if you game it, right? So
the zeros are more important than the ones.
Zeros are
we
great.
Always say in science, right? The failure is always more important because that helps dictate the truth. Like
exactly. This week, actually, today I got my list for this week, and I have any locally caught tuna right now is okay. Which I disagree with a little bit, right? But there is definitely going to be in the store. So I'll be eating tuna this week. Hopefully, I'll get a little choice from there. But But so it's interesting though. And then at the end, it was 25-week experiment, which is great. So a lot of data to collect. And what they're trying to do is find out, is it even possible for people to eat sustainable seafood in their area, right? And if not, why? And who are the gatekeepers? And so what they can do with this data is they can take that data and then they can, my opinion is, shame the businesses who aren't doing the job. Call up the supermarket and say, hey, you got these giant signs all over the store saying sustainable seafood, where 2/3 of your seafood is from Alaska or from Australia or Chile or wherever it happened to be. Maybe we're only an hour from the ocean.
Yeah. Maybe you should just get the local stuff.
Maybe you got to get local stuff, right?
But I think it's also not only just a shame thing. I think it's also a great way to initiate a dialogue.
Sure.
To be like, how come you're not going local?
Well,
is it too expensive? Is it not accessible? Like, do you not have is it a monopoly from somebody else? I mean, that would be the interesting.
That's a good question. And the other thing it's going to do is every week I go in and I say, do you have bay quahog? Yeah. Do you have this? Now, what's going to happen is one person asking the question changes the market. You don't realize how important your voice is until you use it, right? But one person asking every week, hey, do you have this fish? Or hey, do you have that fish? The fish buyer, the fishmonger, the guy behind the counter wants your business. And he's going to say to his boss, hey, boss, why don't we have this fish? Why aren't we serving spiny dogfish?
Yeah.
And then they'll say, well, is it available? And they go, yeah, it's only 15 cents a pound. Oh, let's get it. And rename it Cape Shark and sell it.
Does is because they're not just going to get one for you.
Nope.
They're going to get a bunch of them. And then they're going to be like, hey, do you want to try this? Because we just got it in. People have been asking for it. And it's a great way to market. I've never thought about that for a program like that. That's
sure. And so I think what happens is as they get further in, we'll get more and more positive hits. That's my prediction.
Right.
I'm not the scientist who wrote the experiment. I am going to invite them on the show
for sure.
Midway through. I should connect you too, because you would love to talk to these guys. They're great.
Yeah.
It's called Eating with the Ecosystem. They are a nonprofit out of Rhode Island. They're worth dealing with, and they're smart and interesting. But then it brings us, you're in Toronto, right?
Yep.
All right. So sustainable seafood in Toronto, is that even a thing? If local is on your list of...
It's not fresh.
It's not fresh. So here's the problem, right? Do you actually want fresh seafood in Toronto if you want to eat in a sustainable green way?
Right.
What do you think?
Absolutely.
Do
Absolutely.
you want
I mean,
fresh?
I want fresh.
Okay.
I would rather now I don't
I'm
know.
going to challenge you on this.
All right. But
Go
before
ahead.
we get into that, I just want to say I have to plead ignorance in terms of eating local freshwater fish.
Mm.
Maybe because I'm a marine scientist, but I'm not a fisher person. So, I know some of them, and I've had certain fish that I'm like, oh, that's good. That was good. But like if there's a marine fish on the menu, I'm like, oh, I like it. But then I used to like it. Now I'm like, hold on a second. Atlantic salmon, that's going to take a while to get in here.
And
It's not going to be fresh,
and
it's probably not going to taste as good as what it should be on the East Coast, because I've been on the East Coast and I've been able to have fresh food and cheap fresh seafood, and so I get frustrated. But yeah, no, I there are certain restaurants within like my area that we can go to, and we know we're getting fresh because they're a seafood place and they have freshwater fish on them.
right. So now it's funny. In New Hampshire, we're not even allowed to sell freshwater fish. Like this is not a thing. Yeah, no,
You're
we
not
don't.
allowed.
No.
What's the reasoning behind it?
I laws. I have no idea. I can't tell you why, but there's no market for freshwater fish in New Hampshire. Wow. Now there was a loophole for a while. In Vermont, you're allowed to, right? In New Hampshire, we have some abundant numbers of some freshwater fish, like panfish, for example, like bluegills, pumpkin seeds. And there was a group from Vermont coming to New Hampshire every day and would take their limit of panfish back to serve in restaurants in Vermont, because New Hampshire, you can't do that, which I think was unfortunate. That the laws have changed since then. No, you can't do that either. Right. So in the Great Lakes, though, I know there are freshwater fish restaurants, freshwater seafood restaurants, and but I'm let's just pretend you don't have the Great Lakes and you want to eat ocean fish, which I would agree with you, arguably tastes better than most freshwater fish. Something different about it. I'm people are going to challenge me on this too, I'm sure, but so if you're living, let's say, how long a drive from Toronto to the nearest ocean?
Well, okay, so to the St. Lawrence Seaway, you're probably looking at about 4.5 hours to get to the salt part of the St.
Okay,
Lawrence.
so if that's not terrible.
4.5, 5 hours to get to like Montreal area, which is it's the estuary part. Right?
Okay, and does seafood get delivered into that area, or does your seafood for fresh seafood come from all the way out in the Atlantic Ocean?
Well, I think I have a feeling, depending on the fish, a lot of it will be coming from farms.
From fish farms. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to rethink this whole conversation. So if you were, I would argue, like, if you're going to eat seafood that's from a long way away, that you're going to want it frozen and not fresh.
Yeah.
And because if
freshness will stay.
well, you can overnight,
like flash freeze it.
Or you can even overnight fish, like on helicopters and airplanes, all this stuff, in ice slurries, and they will get where they're going and be fresh and yummy and all that things. And all the things. But the problem is your carbon footprint now gets bigger, right? Mm-hmm. And we're talking sustainable. We're not just talking about the animal. We're talking about the environment. So now you got that. Let's say you want to eat a fresh Chinook salmon from Washington State, right? Which are arguably one of the best fish in the world, right? Big giant king salmon.
For sure.
So you get that flown to a fancy pants restaurant in Toronto, and it gets served to you, and you got your $28.99 a pound fish there, right? Delicious. But that one fish now costs more than just the price of the fish, because the energy to get it to you costs a lot.
Yeah.
But if a truck is driving from Washington State to Toronto full of frozen fish, you can move a lot more fish that way with a lot smaller carbon imprint, or if it's on a train or something like that. Yeah. So I think frozen fish, if it's from far away, if it's local, fresh, that's the way to go. But again, the restaurants, basic, simple question: where is this fish from? That will get the conversation enough where you'll know whether or not you should eat or not. You won't always be right, but it does start that conversation. Now, I went to a sushi place last night. I did not ask that question.
Oh, the sushi place.
The kids are hard.
My kids love sushi.
Me too.
And of course I enjoy sushi, but every time we go, I just I get this guilty feeling because it's always the same,
Mm-hmm.
right? You'll get snapper.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I like sashimi.
Yes, me too. We had that last
Snapper.
night. Yep. Salmon,
Butterfish,
tuna.
tuna.
Mhm.
What's the other one? I think that's sorry, I said snapper, right?
You said
Snapper,
snapper.
salmon, tuna. I think that's it. Is that it?
Yeah. We had.
Yeah, I think those are the three that we usually have.
Mm-hmm.
But it's and then of course there's the kids will do shrimp tempura and all that kind of
It
stuff.
sounds like my meal last night. You just described what I ate.
It's true, but
Yeah.
that's what we normally see. And to be honest, you go to a restaurant anywhere here in Canada, and you're gonna get the same. When it's seafood, you're gonna get the same selection, unless it's a specialty seafood shop.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna get options for lobster, salmon, and because we're in like Ontario, it's usually Atlantic. Every once in a while, it'll be like coho or something like that, and then you'll get like haddock or halibut, which is it's one or the other.
Right. And to be
then-
honest, people eating it almost never know the difference and
No,
don't
of course
care.
Yeah.
They want what they want. I mean, I imagine Canadians and Americans are the same in their fish. I don't want fish to taste fishy. I just want
yeah, no.
white, flaky fish. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
The restaurant I was at last night, on our sashimi, there was also, for the first time, I've never seen this before, it was mackerel, was the sushimi. Like Atlantic mackerel.
You know what? I think we.
And that's not
Wait.
normal.
Yeah,
That's
it's not
bait,
normal,
but
I've
it
seen
was
before.
delicious.
Yeah.
So
Now,
good.
what is interesting, though, I should say, an exception to the rule in the Toronto area, because we have that population. We have a very big, very large Indian population, like East
Mhm.
Indian population. We have a very large Asian population, especially from China, and elsewhere in Asia. But we also have a very large Caribbean population. So that brings in a lot of other types of fish. So my wife is Asian background. Her
Oh,
parents are from Taiwan and Hong Kong. They love their fish. They love their food. So when we go to the Asian restaurants, you see fish from all over the world.
Right, and that's a fun place to go to. Now, I'm not against importing fish and eating them. I just think that
But it's the
local.
footprint.
Yeah, it's a footprint.
You're
So
looking
think
at the
about it.
footprint, but what's interesting about the Asian culture, especially because that's probably one that I've been to more, is they'll eat every part of the fish. They'll eat very bony fish,
Sure.
right? Whereas sort of the Western culture tends to be like, that's too much work.
Yeah, and
I don't want.
so let's dig in on that a little bit. So on our show, on the Fish Nerds podcast, we have a culinary correspondent called Hugo.
Okay.
Hugo's from the Cape. He is Portuguese. His wife, I'm going to get this wrong. He's going to be pissed off at me. His wife is Asian. I want to
Okay.
say from the Philippines, but I could be wrong. But she's from one of those kind of like island nations, right? Who
Yeah.
loves their fish. So
Yes.
that between the two, Portuguese
Depend on their fish.
yeah,
Yeah,
they depend on, and they and there's no such thing as junk fish. Everything's
Right.
food, right? So Hugo is like I call him a seagull. He'll eat anything,
right. Yeah.
but he's always in on the eat this fish challenge. So he went out fishing last weekend, and he brought home some smooth dogfish. Now, smooth dogfish in the Gulf of Maine are shark. They're not a big shark. They're not like your makos and that sort of thing.
No, they're small.
And they're in huge biomass numbers, arguably sustainable fish, right? They're fast
So far.
growers. Yeah.
So far.
So far. So he brought it home, and he was very proud of eating that over some of the bigger pelagic fish he caught, right? And
Yep.
he shared pictures. I think you probably saw some of the
Yeah.
fish and chips he had. And then Rhett Talbot makes comments about the mercury content in these fish.
Right.
Right. And so that I'm doing tonight, just before the show, I'm doing the research. I'm like, really? Because I've been like saying, if you're going to eat shark or you're going to even skip cod,
Dogfish is the way to
dogfish,
go.
nice white flaky meat, delicious, right?
Yeah.
But there's two kinds of dogfish in the Gulf of Maine. There's spiny dogfish and
Yep.
there's smooth dogfish. Smooth dogfish get a little bigger, eat a little higher up in the food chain. And when you eat higher in the food chain,
That's
you-
when the
you aggregate mercury, but they have about 25% of the population of smooth dogfish in the Gulf of Maine right now. They're estimating have mercury content that's much higher than the recommended mercury in anything you should be eating. and it's because it aggregates over time. So if you're going to eat the smooth dogfish, you want to eat small ones, not the
Right.
big ones, right? But spiny dogfish do not have that crazy mercury content. They do have high mercury because everything does, but not crazy. And
Not
also,
above the allowable levels.
right? I think it was like
on average.
it was about 2% on average above the levels, as opposed to 25% on average.
Wow.
And then
2%, that's a lot.
it's not that bad. And then it's not that bad. New Hampshire.
I guess if you eat a lot of it, though.
Yeah, but who's
right?
eating a lot of it, right?
Yeah,
it's,
I guess.
and it aggregates over time. And you're not eating. Like Hugo might be. But most of us, if we're going to eat spiny dogfish fish and chips or smooth dogfish fish and chips, it's one meal a year. It's not going to make any difference. You'd have to
Right.
really consume to make it really have the impact on you. Now, I couldn't find the comparison to these fish and other large fish that we're eating. And I didn't look long enough. Probably, I'm sure the studies exist. But we've been pushing people to eat dogfish for years instead of eating the big sharks or eating cod.
Yeah. And here in Canada, just to let you know, here in Canada, they're actually, especially over in BC, and I guess the Atlantic coast too, they're really looking, Fisheries Ocean is really looking at establishing that as a fishery, like a regular
Oh, sure.
fishery.
Well, I mean, right now it's a bycatch, and mostly they're thrown
Yeah.
overboard or killed, or they make them into dog food or something, something else. But it's supposed to be really, really good. I actually haven't had it yet that I know of. Although I'm told if you've ever traveled to England and had fish and chips, you've eaten dogfish,
Oh, okay.
and it tastes like cod.
Yeah.
Which is a nice thing to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's good. Like, well, you said, it's a good taste.
Mhm.
You know, people like good taste. I don't know if people would love, because the fact that they are a small shark, I don't know if people would love, like you call it spiny dogfish, and that's okay because people are like, oh, spiny dogfish.
Yeah.
That's not a shark. I'm okay. But with everything that's going on with sharks right now, if you hear shark, a lot of people are against the fishery, establishing the fishery.
Sure,
You
and
know,
understandably
a lot of
so, right?
conservationists will come out and say, this is actually a shark. We should be very careful with this. We don't know that much about them.
Right.
And that's the argument.
I will.
around-
I will accept that argument. Well, listen, we're going to eat fish, and we have to kind of decide which ones we're going to eat, right?
Yeah.
So either way, they're going to get eaten, right? Fish are going to be thing.
Right.
So then we look at like on our Facebook group tonight. Ryan Dubé posted this giant like diatribe about why we're not seeing things like sea robin and sculpin and weird fish in restaurants. I don't know if you read it or not, but
I read it. It was a great post.
but basically it's saying is like, yeah, totally true. All delicious fish you can eat. But can we bring it to market? They're small fish. They're bony fish. They've got weird spikes all over them.
They're tough to fillet. They're tough to process.
Yeah. Whereas if you pick up like a large cod, it feels like a big piece of meat. You can just slice a fillet off that thing like it's nothing, and you're at the market. So there's an efficiency issue, right? And I think it's a fair point. We don't have the answers. We're going to keep asking more and more questions and try to make the best choices we can, right? But if you know a fish is endangered, don't eat it.
Yeah.
And if you know if it's in question, don't. If you spend money on a fish that you know is questionable, then you're supporting wiping out that species.
Yeah.
Right. If you know it's questionable, if you don't know, it's okay. It's going to happen. You're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And don't feel bad if you make a mistake. It's going to happen. But next time, don't do it again. Right.
Right. Right.
So you choose the future of our fish with your dollar when you buy seafood. And my vote for you is do some homework, choose fish that are sustainable, and pay your money to companies who are putting that fish in front of you.
Yeah.
But then it gets confusing too, because what about fish farms?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Here's a question. Before we get into that, I have a question for you. Talking about endangered species and so forth. I just came back from the Cayman Islands.
All right. Good.
I talked about this last week. I'm not sure if you heard this episode or not, but so at the Cayman, have you been to the Grand Cayman?
No, I'm not rich. Podcast from Canada. I can't afford to travel like that.
I did not pay for this trip. I guarantee that.
Oh, you got funded.
I'm
One of your
very
sponsors
fortunate.
took you down?
Yeah, my
Yeah.
parents sponsored the podcast.
I need new parents.
Well, we went. So there's this one place they call it the Grand Cayman Sea Turtle Center. Great place. You walk in, very educational. They have a breeding pond, which is basically full of green sea turtles. They have the beach behind. And
You
they
call
go-
it breeding. I call it orgy. One of us
yeah,
is more
orgy.
fun than the
Yeah,
other. That's
it's
all
an
I'm
orgy. That's
saying.
actually the first comment we made.
If you
It's like,
wonder where the party is, it's not at Andrew's house.
no, it's not. It's not a great dude. Yeah, but that's a good one. so anyway, so it very educational. You can see the different stages. You can actually snorkel. They have a lagoon where you can snorkel with the turtles, not touch them, but snorkel with the turtles. There's even like a touch area. They circulate. Anyway, I see if there's a lot of people going through a sea turtle center like that, when they touch, it could be a bad thing when they get cruises come in and everything like that. But to go into, it's also a fish farm, and what they do is, because Grand Cayman has a history for sea turtles. So loggerheads, green sea turtles. I don't know. There was a third one. I don't remember the species. They were known to, like, as a stopover, to have sea turtles. So they would either poach the eggs or they would have the meat of the sea turtle. So the Caymans that live there are all used to eating sea turtles, like in terms of generations. So this center basically says, the way they say is, we fund the center, part of the center, through ticket sales, but we also fund part of it through selling sea turtle meat from the farmed sea turtles, not from the wild, but from the farmed sea turtles, to the restaurants, because we know that the local population will want to eat sea turtles. We're trying to take the pressure off the wild populations, and we actually contribute to the wild populations by releasing baby sea turtles to the ocean. But we also sell sea turtles to the restaurants, sea turtle meat. Now this is where conservation gets complicated.
It's always been complicated,
right? It always gets complicated, but this is one of those situations where you can take either side, and I feel from my perspective, you have a good point.
Sure.
From one side, this sea turtle center is saying, we're taking the pressure off the wild populations, which are all endangered. All the species, 7 species of sea turtles, are endangered around the world. We're taking the pressure off the wild populations by supplying the meat from here, a certain percentage of the meat that we raise, of the sea turtles that we raise. But on the other hand, it's like, why don't you take those sea turtles that you raise and release them,
right,
and contribute to more of that population? Right.
But you said they were doing that.
Well, they are, but they're only doing a proportion. Like,
right.
So
but in the wild, only a small proportion of sea turtles, of a big giant clutch, 2 make it to adulthood, right? So,
but you're increasing those odds maybe by doing it. That's the argument.
That's a fair argument.
That's the argument with a lot of people would say, right?
Yeah.
Is why kill them? Because they're endangered.
Mm-hmm.
But then, from my understanding, it's a staple. I don't know if it's still a staple. We went to a number of restaurants. We only saw it on the menu once.
Right. And you didn't buy it.
My brother bought it.
Well, because aren't you curious, though? Did you taste it?
He's curious. He said it tasted like chicken.
Bullshit.
Tastes
like sea turtle.
But he said he just said it didn't really taste like anything different or anything that he would get again.
Well, I mean, that's the basic fact of the matter is culture sometimes sucks. And I think culture is the worst reason to keep doing stuff that's wrong. I hate the argument that we do it because it's culture. It doesn't hold. We had slaves at one point, right, in this country. That was part of our culture. Does not make it okay. True. We murdered all the buffaloes. That didn't make it okay because it's part of our culture. Culture sucks at conservation. We need to fight against our nature, and human nature is not conservation, by the way. Human nature is consumption. We need to fight that. Conservation is all about, I think, going against our norms and our culture. It's kind of like a little punk rock almost. It's like, screw you, I'm not eating that fish. Yeah, man. Yeah.
You know what? It's by the way, I just pictured you with the mohawk. It's fantastic.
Anytime you picture me with hair, it's a win. I didn't wear this hat because the hat looks good.
That's awesome. Yeah. But it's funny because it's something that I've been thinking about for a while too, especially when it's coming to eating any kind of seafood it's sort of been the underlying theme to this is we can't have everything.
No, we have to
realize that as a human population that we can't have or everything.
Mm-hmm.
We can't, physically we can. Like if we want fish, like if I want grouper and I live in Toronto, there is a restaurant that will probably serve grouper.
Look, if you got money, you can have things.
Right.
You can have it.
But is it ethically right as someone who wants to take care of the earth or the ocean or both? Is it really right? We have to understand that we have to have limits.
Right.
We can't have any fish we want at any time because it doesn't make sense from a climate change perspective, and like you said, that whole process to get that fish onto your plate is a huge carbon footprint.
Sure.
And we need to realize that from just managing our lives a little bit better, that local is better. If you want something different, go to a different place. When you're on vacation, then partake in local.
Then eat turtles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, when it comes to endangered species, don't eat turtles. And I told my brother, I'm like, don't eat turtles. Damn it, they're endangered.
Yeah, you're paid money to make it keep happening. That's what you
We
do.
did have an argument because of it, I have to admit. But we're brothers, and that's what we do. But I think it's we need to realize that there's limits to what we can have and partake in, right? And I think that once we start realizing that, and once we start showing that publicly and accepting that, that's when we're going to start to change things, right? And I feel that without doing that, we're just going business as usual. I swear to God, when I was in Grand Cayman, on the menu, I saw salmon, Pacific salmon, and I went, "Why would I come to Grand Cayman to eat Pacific salmon?"
Because you're a North American.
Right.
And as a North American, that's the
our
fish.
That's our thing to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's our go-to.
Yep.
Right.
Salmon,
But
cod,
it's
that's
like,
it.
it doesn't make sense. And cod was on the menu too. And I said, look, why would I come all the way from the north to the south to eat northern fish? It doesn't make sense. I asked them, and it's, to be honest, it's the same thing. And going back to craft beer, I asked them, what's your local beer? What's your local beer? And what's your local fish? Because I want to have, and what's the best? I actually asked, I said, what's the best to pair?
Perfect.
Right? And they
See?
said, oh, and they were good that way. But
They
but
know
it's-
their beers.
important. Yeah, it's important because, and I think like looking at that and asking them, one, it's great because when you go to a different place, you really get into the culture, and about the culture. But it's also you're eating locally. You're helping the local economy, and plus you're trying something new, which is kind of a treat. And I think we need to realize that those treats mean, some good things, not only from the environment, but for us as well. Is like every once in a while, oh yeah, okay, if I want to go and have, mahi or yellow snapper or red snapper, I need to go to a place where they get it locally, because especially those small islands, you're normally getting it from an artisanal fishing community, where they're not grabbing it all at once. They're doing it sustainably. Hopefully, that's what you expect.
That's what you hope. Now, what do you think about farm-raised fish? Things like tilapia, pen-raised Atlantic salmon in the ocean, inland fish farms, trout farms. I was at the Sensible Seafood Festival, and there were people there serving farmed tilapia and farmed rainbow trout. I was the sole judge of what's sustainable. I got to be the one who chose the winner for that whole. I was the only judge. It was my decision, and I eliminated any fish that was from far away, and anything that had a lot of packaging involved with it. So I chose the winner based on like, there's no napkin, there's no plastic cup, there's no spork needed. It's just food in my hand, right? It was only about 5 of those available. But so what about farm fish? And this is something that I don't know about. Like, a lot of reputable food distributors and Sensible Food and sustainable food programs recommend some farmed fish.
You know what? If we go by,
I think it's part of the mix, right?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the mix. And there's the argument that farm fish will really be there to supply the world with food eventually, because the population is just getting so big that we can't sustain wild fishing all this time. That's
Right.
one of the arguments of farm fish.
It's a fair argument.
It's a definitely fair argument. When you look at it from our definition of sustainable as an entire process, if I'm getting farm fish from the Atlantic and coming to Toronto, it's the same thing as getting, in terms of getting wild. Yes, you're taking some pressure off the wild stocks, but there's inherent problems in open pen ocean farming.
Well, you see that. I don't know if you've been to Puget Sound at all, but they've got Atlantic salmon pens out there. I've kayaked out next to them, and They're full of big salmon, and seals
Yep.
tear holes in them, and then the
Absolutely.
salmon get out, and they're starting to breed in the waters where the Chinook spawn, and that's problematic, right?
Well, and there was a study that came out saying that a disease that was brought in through the open pen system got into the wild population, the Pacific population, and that's what decreased. Was one of the biggest hits when a couple of years ago when we saw a big dip in the amount of coho salmon coming back.
Sure. Yeah, not to mention
Which,
the
of course-
dams are still the biggest impact.
Well,
right?
of course, yeah. No, I mean, there's other problems as
Yeah.
well, but
Turns
that's
out
another
humans
problem.
are the big impact problem here with
for
all
sure,
these things.
for sure.
Um,
And I mean,
yeah.
when you're looking at, not only are humans relying on coho salmon, the First Nations groups relying on coho salmon, but you're also looking at a resident orca population that is endangered that only eats salmon.
Oh, let's shoot them. This
But
is,
it's true.
this is
and-
where we're going with some of these conversations tonight.
I know.
We're heading there. So
It is.
it's
True.
The fishermen are
so
funny
that's-
about things.
It's true. It's well. I mean, look at when we discuss the gray seal on my show and your show. People are like, why can't we just cull them?
Well, we're having that conversation this week on the Fish Nerds page. I brought it into it from another fishing page where people are talking about wanting to go out and shoot the cormorants out in the Great Lakes and at Lake Champlain because they're eating all the stocked fish.
Right.
And I'm like, they're eating stocked fish. Stop stocking all this fish. It's fish
Yeah.
for something else. But then
Yeah.
you get this cultural problem going on, and I don't know the answer, but early research.
There are programs like government programs
Yeah.
that try and I guess I'm trying to think of the right word.
manage.
Are trying to just make it difficult for cormorants to settle.
Yeah.
We have actually, believe it or not, right beside the building that I work at, the government building, we have 3 islands that were made as bird migration stopovers, and they're run over by cormorants, and they have a program where they get trained birds of prey to chase them off.
Interesting. And now you want
They
to
don't do it anymore, but they used to do it.
Now, cormorants were near extinct in the 1970s because of DDT, right? So you want to talk conservation win? Cormorants are back.
Conservation win.
Right,
Yep.
total win.
Same with the
And-
gray seal population in Cape Cod, right?
Right.
Same.
And of
And-
course,
and the same thing with the great whites in California.
Yeah,
People right
absolutely.
now are freaking out that there's so many great whites, juvenile great whites,
it's great.
that are all on the coast that are all along the coast of California. I remember talking to Chris Lowe out in Long Beach, and he was like, "Yeah, this is a huge win because of the different regulation tools that we put into place, saving the sea lions, and that cascades into protecting an endangered species and bringing them back from the brink." These are conservation wins, but when it comes to interfering with human activities, fishing, surfing, paddleboarding, scuba diving,
Sure.
whatever, swimming, then people start to, certain people start to get annoyed and
Right.
say, we need to bring back a hunt. We need to control them when we shouldn't
Well,
be controlling populations. We should be controlling ourselves.
Well, here's the hard part, right? Let's pretend, and I'm a fishing guide, so I hear this argument. I'm a fishing guide on Lake Champlain, and I'm catching less salmon this year than I've caught in the last 5 years. Meanwhile, I'm watching cormorants eat salmon by the hundreds. That's what they're saying. That's what they're reporting to me. Of course, my livelihood is at stake. This is what I went to school for. I've invested all my life savings in this. I am not changing careers now. I'm a 43-year-old gnarly fisher guy, right?
right.
What do I do now? I gotta do something, right? So I contact the local government agency and I say, hey, what's happened with these cormorants? And they say they're protected, and they're only about 20% of their diet is your salmon and trout, and the rest is herring and whatever else. Am I happy with that answer? Because what I'm seeing is different than what is being reported to me, and that's what we're facing right now. Is
Yeah.
the observation of the fishermen doesn't match the science, and how do we get those guys all together to figure that out?
Well, and that's where it comes when you look at conservation, is when you bring stakeholders together. Government needs to speak to stakeholders and vice versa. It has to be, when you talk about, it doesn't matter whether it's a lake, it doesn't matter whether it's an ocean, you have that communication going. What it used to be like is each department in government used to manage a different, say, human activity, right? So let's talk about big ocean. You're looking at, One we had for Canada, we had the Energy Board managing oil and gas leases. You had Fisheries and Oceans managing, they would manage the oil and gas because they manage the bottom, but they'd also manage fisheries. You have Parks Canada putting in parks, and so all the different and Environment Canada managing different aspects, but they weren't allowed to do water. They were only allowed to do land. So when the birds go out to water, it's something different. It was so jumbled. And it wasn't until we brought in the Oceans Act, and it's still not clear, that we bring everybody together so that we can put in marine protected areas and we can do ocean planning.
Right. And that matters.
That matters because right now it's the wild, wild west out on the water. Because everybody's been allowed to do whatever they want. And that includes big companies, that includes commercial fishing communities, recreational fishing communities. Really, we haven't really managed them in a certain way. And there haven't been zones like we have on land, right? Every city, every county, every region, every province, every state have everything divided up, all land divided up into, something that's protected, something that's zoned for business, residents, parks, whatever. We don't have that in the ocean yet. Certain parts do, but we don't have it in the ocean. Now, it happened out in BC recently, and it was a weird thing that went on because at first it was the federal agencies were really driving this program. They had the BC government, the provincial government, and they also had the First Nations tribes. So there's a lot of First Nations tribes on the West Coast, just like there is on the U.S. side, or the U.S. Part. They were involved. Everybody was involved. Then all of a sudden, conservatives in charge, and they're like, no, we're pulling out because we want a pipeline to go through. So we're pulling out the federal departments. The province and the First Nations kept that going. Now they have an entire plan for every human activity in the ocean for the BC coast. They have that plan. And now that we have a more environmentally friendly government in, now they're trying to bring the feds back and say, okay, now what, based on, feds handle oil and gas and fisheries. Now, how does that plan, get more involved? It gets more complex, but there's still more stakeholder meetings. But that's what we need to do. We need to divide up the ocean in terms of the economic zone that we have, exclusive economic zone, and we need to plan it out. And that goes with fisheries. That goes with fish farms. That goes with recreational activities. It goes with boating. It goes with shipping lanes, especially. All that matters. And then you've got the environment, like the natural environment that needs to be protected. And that should happen in lakes. It should happen in the Great Lakes. It should happen in Lake Champlain. It should happen everywhere. And then the science and the policies and the management initiatives should be shared amongst everybody.
And communicate in a way that's understandable. The other thing that I think go right along with what you're saying is government needs to move faster. And be able to respond to people in a way where they feel like they're being heard. Because these guys complaining, I guarantee you that people they're talking to in the government are hearing them, and it takes a long time. It's like steering a train. You can do it. You got to just move those tracks along. It takes a long time to do it.
Absolutely.
But people aren't feeling like they're being heard, and then they vote against their own best interest because they feel like no one's hearing them because things aren't happening fast.
Right.
And that's not how government works. Government is a process, right? It takes time.
It's a process. Well, it's also any communication, and I've seen it because I work within the government. Every communication that goes out has to be reviewed and has to be perfect, because if they say anything that looks wrong or that looks different, people are going to call them out on it. So they have to be
No, really? A government going to be called out when they're wrong?
Yeah.
Good thing they're never wrong.
It's good thing they're never wrong. But especially when it comes to science, and policy, when you're dealing with human activities, it's like you're essentially controlling or trying to regulate people's livelihoods.
Yeah, and that's the hardest part.
That's the hardest, especially from a dying industry, like an industry that you're getting less fish for, say, commercial fisheries. So they're looking for food. You're getting into a changing environment, and now you got to change your policies.
Right, and it's so easy for us who don't make our living on a fishing boat to decide what people should be doing.
Yeah.
But I mean, basically, if it's all, I honestly, I think economics is going to drive everything eventually.
For sure.
And we need to look at that. And by the way, there's a great book. It's a few years old now, probably 20 years old now, but it's called The Ecology of Commerce. Have you ever read this book?
No, I don't. I've heard of it. I haven't.
So
read
it's
it yet.
it's a classic looking at using economics to drive good ecology, right?
Right.
One of the premises in the book is you tax waste.
Right.
So in order to eliminate waste, single-use plastic, this is 20 years ago,
Yeah.
you would okay, sure, you want to buy that single-use water bottle? It's going to cost you $1 extra.
Yeah.
Or you can fill up for free over at the sink over there. You know,
Yeah.
like it's taxing things. So you choose whether or not you want to pay that thing, and that money goes to conservation and to cleaning the environment and taking care of those problems. So maybe you want to have like a sustainable fish tax relief program or something. So if you choose to eat
Read it.
sustainably, and they define it, they really work hard at that definition, but so you're eating the bait fish as opposed to the big pelagic, big roaming fish. Maybe those are cheaper, not just because there's less market for them, but because we're going to levy a tax on the big game fish, because that's what's we're ruining. And and the government's spending millions and millions, billions of dollars trying to get these fish back. Meanwhile, we're depleting them at a faster rate than they can recover. Now I'm just throwing ideas here. These are not my policy things. I just
No, I hear you.
we're just talking, but we need to be more creative in our answers, and we need to find a way to let the economy drive it. Because, to be honest, people like conservation, but people like money more. And and if it's cheaper, they're going to do it. And so when they're shopping for their fish, they're going to shop. Most people can't afford to buy, Patagonian toothfish at $23 a pound or whatever it is. It's
You mean Chilean sea bass?
yeah, although they don't get it in Chile anymore. Now it's caught off the coast of Australia. It's not Chilean sea bass. It's a different kind of toothfish.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other.
That's a whole other.
We
that's
could
a
do
whole
it.
other show.
I would love to get an expert on fish names on and do a whole hour on fish names, because they rename fishing markets so much.
It's so crazy.
But maybe we need to think about more creative answers. And
Definitely.
when gas prices were going up, a market for efficient cars existed. Now gas prices in the U.S. have dropped. SUVs are back. The people.
It goes on the for sure.
It's got to be money. It's got to cost more money to be a terrible person. That would be the solution.
And here's going to a basic example. We're talking a lot about North America here because that's what we know.
Yeah. Well,
but
there's no other part of the world.
Oh, of course.
We're it,
But
man.
One of the stories that always captures me, especially when you're looking at the fishing community, great way to end the show is because it makes it so complex, is in Indonesia, they created a shark sanctuary, so a protected area for sharks. Because what happens off this coast, there was a huge finning practice, so shark finning practice. And the reason why there's such a shark finning practice is because when it came about, because of the price of the fins were so high for the fishermen, the fishing community, the people in the families in the fishing community could afford to pay for their kids to go to school. Without finning and just regular fishing, their kids couldn't afford to go to school.
Well, then if I was those people, I would fin.
Right.
I would. You have no choice. You're stuck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, but they're vilified in the media because there's no, all they hear is, oh, they're finning. And this is not like necessarily like a bad part on each side. It's just the way it works. But then when they brought in the sanctuary, the people who put in the sanctuary spoke to the fishing community, and they said, hold on a second, let's figure out a way that we can keep that lifestyle going and put in the sharks to protect the sharks, put in the sanctuary. So what they did is they ended up teaching them how to get involved in the shark tourism industry. So diving, so they became boat operators, and they were paid a salary, and they were still able. Now I'm not sure if everybody in the fishing community were able to do this, but this is the story that came out saying some of them were able to become boaters, and they had a salary, and they worked for a company, and they worked more in a more positive form, more sustainable form.
Sure.
And they were able to send their kids to think, because to school, if they weren't able to, I'm not sure this would have worked. And I think that's what we really need to do is and when I talk about, talking to the communities, we really need to put in training. As another example, that's not fishing related, you look at Alberta, here in Canada.
Yeah. Now, I'm just making a clarification here. I'm in the United States. Alberta, we don't know where that is.
Okay, Alberta is in Alberta's in the praise. This is the tar sands, home of the tar sands.
All right.
We all know about the tar sands. It neighbors British Columbia. It's almost on the coast, not quite. Calgary,
All right.
Edmonton, great hockey teams. That's all you need to know, and great CFL football teams. But everybody in that, arguably, most of the people in that province are working in the tar sands or have something to do with the tar sands industry. Now, because of politics, because of OPEC putting down prices, our economy has dropped because our previous government put all our resources in building future pipelines and getting tar sands out to the Asian markets. Didn't go well. Prices went down. It costs a lot to extract oil out of the tar sands. These people are out of work and they are angry.
And you would be too.
Well, of course, because they're out of work. And it's expensive to live in Alberta because the prices shot up.
Right. Because
Crazy,
metric money.
Of course,
Yeah.
right? So now we're in a stance where they want to go back to work because that's what they know how to do, and they know the tar sands industry. The government is doing a little bit of both, but they should be training, in my opinion, these engineers who are very smart. They know their stuff. Engineers, the oil sands workers, to be going into renewable energy because that's where the future is going to be.
Sure.
Right? We all know oil and gas is going to be gone. Coal is already starting.
Coal is
to go out.
forever.
Apparently,
I'm aware.
apparently,
Yeah.
it's kind of going through a resurgence.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, even the coal industry is like, we're not going to be around for
Right.
much.
We don't want to be around.
we don't
It's a
wanna be around.
terrible place.
Yeah. So, but we all know that the renewable is going to be hard. So these people should be trained or should be training to go into the renewable or should be hired because they already have
Mhm.
let's be honest, they already have the skill set to do it. They just need a little training to get into it. So the whole point of this argument is talk to the people who are involved, who are going to be affected, because it's not the ocean that we have to manage, it's the people that we have to manage.
Absolutely. Well,
And-
there's another approach too, entirely, which
What's that?
we don't like talking about, right? But I listened to another podcast, Freakonomics podcast,
Love Freakonomics.
and they did a whole thing on what if we just gave people money rather than funding programs. So rather than funding
do
all
it,
these job training, whatever, you're paying other people to show people how to work. All these people who need to be retrained and they're old and they're stuck in their ways. Why don't we just pay you a salary the rest of your life and you stop doing that horrible thing? And then that's one generation and we're done. And we move on. And I bet you if the math, according to the Freakonomics, it actually is cheaper just to pay people than to run the programs. And people know what to do with their own money. They
Was
know,
that the conclusion of that?
people know how to spend their own money when what's best for them, and we don't.
Right.
So all these programs, which are expensive to run, you got to have management, you got to have buildings, you need infrastructure.
Telling people you have to do this.
Yep.
if,
You jump
if
through hoops, and we'll give you a percentage of the amount of money we're going to actually spend on the program. Why don't we just give them the money and not manage it and say, so you make $40,000 a year as a coal miner. It's all you're ever going to make. Here's 40,000 a year until your pension, and then the coal mine's dead, and we move on. And we build colleges, and we train people to make solar panels or whatever it is, or
But
we
that
pay
would
fishermen
require
not
education.
to fish, or we
That would
pay...
require investing in education, and that governments aren't involved in that.
Yeah, no,
They don't want to.
it's coming. Look, things are changing. It's going to be okay. And just to kind of recap things, though, where I am a fisherman. I do make part of my living on the water as a fishing guide. I do eat fish. On our show, we have a boat captain called Captain Sean Tibbetts, who runs Miss Megan 2 out of Maine, MaineTunaFishing.com, and I've been shark fishing with him. And I've caught and eaten a mako shark. Before I did that, I asked Maine Fish and Wildlife, is this a safe fish to eat? Am I doing the right thing? And so we did it. And then I went on public radio the next day, and all hell,
Oh yeah, people aren't going to like you.
they didn't like me, and they were right. I was wrong to do that, but at the time, I checked in with the local resources and didn't realize I was wrong. People are going to make mistakes. My biggest
But
regret.
Why did they, like you said, you talked to the government, like the state government?
Yeah.
And they said it was okay.
Well, because
Why did
in
they
the
say
Gulf
that?
of Maine, mako shark numbers are strong. There are tons of them. They're everywhere. And so they have really, really huge numbers in the Gulf of Maine. There are a lot of mako sharks, but they are large fish that swim across the world. And so they are not, just because fish are huge in numbers in one area doesn't make them big everywhere. And that's what we didn't catch on to. And regulations are done state by state for fisheries. And so, and there are some there's federal laws too, but like a lot of this is state by state. So Maine regulations said, totally okay.
Yeah.
And so I trusted those people, and maybe I was wrong to do that. My biggest regret is not killing and eating that shark. It was delicious. My kids ate it. We fed about 20 families. I paid a bar tab with a piece of the shark. Is not eating the fins because I didn't think about it. But now I'm like, I want to know what the I don't want to ever. I'm never going to pay for shark fin soup, but don't you want to know what's so special? Like if you had a chance, because were there anyway, the fish was already dead. I didn't use the whole fish. I used everything except for the fins. Right. Maybe I should have had shark fin soup. I don't know. Like we're going to get blowback on this now.
No. You know what?
It's real life and it happens.
But there's a difference. and a lot of people have arguments with this, but there's a difference when there's a shark fishery that's established.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between finning, where you're just going for the fin and throwing the shark back, to eating the entire
shark, right? Which, by the way, that's my thing with shark finning is there's a lot of things with it, but
people aren't going to like us for this, but
shark is delicious. It's so good.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think, but when you look at it, like you look at the whole sustainability, you look at what's happening with every shark, and we know very little about sharks in general. When you look at the overall sort of stats, but we know how much they're declining.
Mm-hmm.
That would prevent me from eating shark.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm done with it now.
That respect. Yeah, no, for sure.
I've learned,
I want to make it clear that if somebody buys a shark or catches a shark and buys a shark legally, there's a difference with, trying to eat the entire shark and then just compared to just chopping off the fins and throwing the shark back alive. There's that barbaric aspect, but it's also the waste aspect.
Oh, absolutely.
Of the entire fish. So I wouldn't necessarily feel guilty in that respect. I'll be honest. There is a story that I have, where I was at a banquet with my in-laws. It was a banquet dinner, and shark fin soup was served. It was the first time I've ever seen it. I knew about the problems with shark fins. It was probably the worst hour that I saw this come out because there were a lot of people there. And the people that were eating it at my table were just crazy. And of course I refused it. I actually had to get up, leave the room.
Oh, it's upsetting.
And just because it was so upsetting. But what was nice, what came out of that, my father-in-law understood that. He was not involved in the organizing. But that was a regular occurrence at banquet dinner. It was a wedding. But after, when we would go to banquet dinners and he was in charge of the menu, or my mother-in-law and father-in-law were in charge of the menu, they would X the shark fin soup because they knew about the repercussions. Like we've talked about it. They knew how upset I would be, so they would take it off. That is a win for me.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And it goes to show that I have, they have a lot of respect for me and the environment, because that's what they know. So
it all comes down to you. It's one person at a time. It's one fish at a time. It's communicating, and we're gonna get it wrong, and we're gonna get it wrong a lot. And
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And Captain Sean, who goes out, he makes his living on the ocean. He's doing everything legally.
Yeah.
And he's got to make his living, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to be going fishing with him, but we're not going out for makos. We weren't targeting makos that day. We were supposed to catch blue shark. It was a catch and release trip, but it's a long story. But we got into it.
Yeah, but you got to do it. And I think I've heard that story before.
Yeah.
But like you said, we learn from our mistakes. I make mistakes on the show quite often. Actually, that's how I met Rhett Talbot. There's a mistake that I made.
Rhett will tell you every mistake you make.
Exactly.
He's not
I think
shy.
It's important. I think it's part of the science communications. I'm not perfect. We're not perfect, but we're getting information out there, and we admit our mistakes. And I think that's important. That transparency is important in a podcast. We see it in mine. We see it in yours. And to be honest, I think that's really why so many people engage us in our groups, through the podcast, through email, however, through social media, because we're so open about it and we're not afraid to admit our mistakes. And it's not easy. It sucks when you make a mistake, but that's how
we practice making mistakes around
we
here.
practice all the time. But I'll tell you, Clay, I just want to thank you for coming on the show. This has been awesome. This is obviously going to be first of many times.
Oh, anytime. Yeah.
Because it was a really interesting conversation. Sustainable fishing is difficult to get a hold of, but I think the definition that you proposed today in terms of the overall process and easy for us to think about that.
Right, so let's recap it. Is it local? Is it abundant? Is it fished well, safely? And is it fresh? So it means in season is what fresh means.
Right.
So those are your 4 factors. But if it's traveling a long way, get it frozen. That's kind of the 5th kind of sidebar.
Absolutely.
But that's it. Simple. But really, just talk to people. Where was this fish caught? That's the only question you have to ask at most restaurants to get everything you need.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and if they don't know, go for the pork.
Pork is delicious.
Thanks a lot, Clay. I really appreciate it, guys.
Anytime.
Go to it's fishnerds.com, right?
Sure, everything's Fish Nerds, yeah.
Fishnerds.com. Go to iTunes, download the podcast. I think you're on all the other apps and Stitcher.
We are the second easiest podcast to find. The easiest one is Speak Up for the Blue.
There we go.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. But no, thank you very much. We'll put all the links to the group as well. You guys can join the Fish Nerds group, join our group. We cross-pollinate all the time. It's going to be awesome. But thank you very much, Clay, for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, hey, thanks, Andrew. And always fun to have him on the show. What do you think of that?
Oh, I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, it's
He's full of information.
yeah, the guy knows his stuff.
He really does.
Yeah, in fact, the week after that, he had a guy on who is an ocean economist looking at the economy of sustainable seafood. So a whole different money approach. If money is your driver and not the environment, you'll hear about that on his show. So it's worth your time.
Oftentimes that's the way to get people onto the environmental causes through the financial aspect.
There's no
of it.
downside to having a good environment.
No,
It's good financially, it's good for the environment, and everyone wins. So
yeah.
Anyway, so that's it. You've listened to a whole bunch of Fish Nerds when you should have been fishing. Thanks to Hugo. Thanks to Andrew Lewin. Thanks to you, Nick.
Oh, glad to
Yeah.
be here. Always a blast.
Always fun. So until next time, follow the code of the Fish Nerds.
Spawn early and often.
Right. Avoid free lunches with strings attached
And swim against the current.
every chance you get. Oh, and now it's time for your local fishing reports.
Hi, this is Steve from the North Country Angler, North Conway, New Hampshire. This week, the fishing in the Mount Washington Valley has been great. The fish are biting on flies in all of the major rivers and ponds. The best fly has been the red quill, followed by the yellow Sally, and then the tan caddis. But if you want to try something different, use a little brook trout, little rainbow trout, or little brown trout bucktail. Thanks for listening, and you can find me at the North Country Angler Facebook page. Tight lines, everybody.
Hey, Fish Nerds, Captain Sean here from MainTunaFishing.com. The bass fishing's on fire right now. Had about 2 hours on the water this morning and averaged a fish almost every cast. Should get better. Bigger fish start showing up here. Some 40s, some rumors of a few 50s kicking around. The majority of the striped bass are 18 to 25 inches. Still a good time. The offshore fishing's pretty good. Expect to get better over the next week or so as bigger bodies of pollock move in. The codfish are thick. It's tough to keep getting away from them, but we've managed to get it done. Shark fishing probably start heating up here in the next week or so with these pollock showing up. I expect to see some bigger porbeagles kicking around. Keep an eye on my Facebook page, MainTunaFishing.com. We'll be running open boat charters once a week. Pretty decent price for a 10-hour day on a charter boat with only 4 other people. Stay fishy, my friends.